The day it all began, I felt a peculiar disquiet, like a faint breeze unsettling the still surface of my mind. My wife, Sarah, was a housekeeper at a luxury hotel downtown. She often returned home late, exhausted from the demands of her job, and I always did my best to support her. It was her dream job, she said, a stepping stone toward a better position in hospitality management. I believed her. For 10 years, we had built a life together. A modest home, shared laughter, and quiet evenings spent watching our favorite shows. Lately, though, something felt off. It started small. The odd missed call, the rare slip in her otherwise affectionate demeanor, and a vague sense of detachment. I chalked it up to stress, to her increasing workload, and told myself to trust her. I'd always trusted her. Until that Tuesday night. She came home later than usual, her movements hurried and her tone clipped. When I asked how her day had gone, she muttered something about a double shift and vanished upstairs. Left in the kitchen, I stared at her half-empty coffee cup, her lipstick smudged on the rim. The mark was faint, but the shade was new, not one I'd ever seen her wear before. That night, as Sarah lay asleep, I couldn't find rest. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. What was I missing? Was I overthinking? Or was there something hidden beneath the surface of our routine life? The next day, my suspicions led me to a discovery that began unraveling the fragile threads of my world. A note tucked into her purse, written in a handwriting I didn't recognize. It read, "Meet me in room 506 at 10 p.m. I couldn't breathe when I read that note, the words burning into my brain like a brand. Room 506, 10 p.m. My first reaction was disbelief. This couldn't be what it looked like. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a professional note left by a guest or a coworker. But the more I stared at it, the less plausible those excuses became. I placed the note back in her purse exactly how I'd found it, careful not to disturb anything else. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my thoughts constantly returning to the note. Every time I pictured Sarah's smile, the one I thought was mine, I felt a sharp pang of something between anger and grief. By evening, I'd made up my mind. I had to know the truth. Sarah returned home on autopilot that night, her routine unchanged. She cooked dinner with the same efficiency, exchanged small talk, and excused herself early, saying she was exhausted. I wanted to confront her then and there, but something in me stopped. If she lied, and I was certain now she would, I wouldn't be able to handle it. Not without proof. I decided to follow her instead. The hours ticked by slowly until she finally grabbed her coat and purse. She glanced over her shoulder, offering me a quick, rehearsed excuse. Just some laundry I need to drop off for work. Won't be long. Before I could respond, she was out the door. I waited a few minutes to ensure she wouldn't notice, then grabbed my keys and followed. The drive downtown felt surreal. My chest tightened with every block I passed. When I reached the hotel, I parked far enough away to avoid being seen and slipped into the lobby through a side entrance. I stayed in the shadows, my heart pounding as I scanned the gilded surroundings. The elevator doors slid open, and I saw her step out, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She didn't glance back. I followed, keeping a safe distance, my nerves raw as I shadowed her up the stairs to the 5th floor. At the far end of the corridor, she stopped in front of a door, room 506. She knocked twice. The door opened a crack, just enough for her to slip inside. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, but something told me to wait. Instead, I crept closer, listening at the door. Muffled voices, a man's low tone mingling with Sarah's familiar one, reached my ears. I couldn't make out the words, but the laughter that followed was enough to confirm my worst fears. The betrayal hit like a freight train, leaving me gasping for air. I stumbled back down the hallway, retreating to my car. My mind raced, and the rage simmering in my chest demanded action. This wasn't over. Not yet. I sat in my car outside the hotel, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced as I tried to process what I'd just witnessed. She was in there with someone else. Sarah, the woman I had loved and trusted for a decade, was sharing laughter and intimacy with another man behind closed doors. But my anger wasn't ready to explode. Not yet. Something in me, a cold and calculating instinct I didn't know I had, took over. I couldn't let this pass. If I confronted her now, she'd have excuses. She'd deny it, twist the story, and somehow make it seem like I was the one at fault. No, I needed more than my suspicions and a single note. I needed undeniable proof. My heart still hammering, I pulled out my phone and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I made a reservation at the same hotel, but for the following night. Room 508, adjacent to 506. The plan formed in my mind as quickly as the reservation confirmation arrived. I would pretend to be her client. The rest of the night passed in a haze. I returned home before Sarah, and when she finally walked through the door, I was sitting on the couch, trying to mask the storm brewing beneath the surface. She offered me a tired smile, muttered something about a long day, and disappeared into the bathroom for a shower. I watched her retreating figure with a mixture of sorrow and fury. How had we ended up here? The next day, I went through the motions at work, my mind preoccupied with the task ahead. By the time evening rolled around, I was more focused than I'd ever been in my life. I packed a small bag, just enough to make my appearance at the hotel believable, and made my way downtown. When I arrived, the same lavish lobby greeted me, its marble floors and gilded details feeling colder now than the night before. I checked in and went straight to room 508. The walls were thin, and I could hear faint sounds coming from the room next door. Laughter. A man's voice. Her voice. I clenched my jaw and paced the small room, rehearsing what I would do. If I knocked on that door, would she open it? Would she even recognize me if I disguised my voice, pretended to be someone else? My stomach churned at the thought. Finally, I couldn't wait any longer. I dialed the hotel's room service line and ordered a bottle of champagne, giving the delivery instructions for room 506. Compliments of an admirer, I told the staff, lowering my voice. Minutes later, I watched through the peephole as a bellhop knocked on their door, champagne in hand. Sarah answered, her expression curious. She accepted the bottle, and I saw her glance around the hallway. She was looking for someone. For me. I smiled grimly, knowing she wouldn't find me. Not yet. The bottle of champagne was a test, a calculated step to see if she'd take the bait. Through the narrow peephole of my room, I watched Sarah linger in the doorway of room 506. She was dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, one I didn't recognize. Another piece of the life she kept hidden. She held the bottle in one hand, scanning the hallway with a look of mild curiosity. When no one appeared, she shrugged and stepped back inside. I had my answer. Whoever was in that room with her wasn't just a casual fling. He wasn't even aware of the gift. That bottle was for her. I let out a slow breath, retreating from the door. My plan had to move forward now. I pulled out my phone and dialed the hotel desk. This time, I made my move. Hi, this is room 508, I began, keeping my voice low and calm. I was supposed to meet someone staying in room 506 tonight, but I think there's been some confusion. Could you connect me to their line? Of course, sir, the receptionist replied politely. A moment later, the phone on the other end began to ring. I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to hear the muffled sounds of Sarah answering. Hello? She said, her tone cautious but slightly amused. I deepened my voice, disguising it as best I could. Is this Sarah? There was a long pause. Who's asking? She finally replied, her voice tinged with suspicion. A friend, I said cryptically. Someone who's seen you around and thought you might like to chat. I cringed inwardly at the words, hating myself for stooping to this level. But I pushed on, my resolve hardening. I sent the champagne. Did you get it? Her laugh was soft, but there was a nervous edge to it. I did, but I think you've got the wrong idea. I'm busy tonight. I bit back the urge to scream. Busy? I repeated smoothly. With the gentleman I saw you checking in with yesterday? She gasped, the sound faint through the wall but unmistakable. I had her attention now. Look, she said sharply, I don't know who you are, but this isn't funny. Stop calling me. I grinned. I'll stop calling, I replied, my voice cold. But maybe you should think about what your husband would say if he knew where you were tonight. Or better yet, who you were with. There was silence. I could picture her standing frozen, her face paling as the implications sank in. Then, her voice came back, low and trembling. What do you want? Meet me in the lobby. 5 minutes. Alone. I hung up before she could respond, adrenaline coursing through my veins. My hands trembled as I grabbed my coat and headed for the elevator. If she showed up, it would mean she was desperate enough to lie to her companion and meet a stranger. If she didn't, it would mean the betrayal went deeper than I imagined. Either way, the truth was coming. The hotel lobby was nearly empty, its quiet elegance providing a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I picked a spot in the corner, half hidden by a tall potted plant, and waited. My heart thundered in my chest, each passing second feeding a volatile mix of anticipation and dread. Finally, the elevator doors slid open, and Sarah stepped out. She was wearing the same black dress, though she had thrown on a long trench coat over it, as if trying to shield herself from more than just the cool night air. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she glanced around, her face a mask of worry and impatience. I stayed hidden, watching as she nervously approached the concierge desk, presumably to inquire about the mysterious caller. My pulse quickened as I studied her movements, the fidgeting, the way she avoided meeting anyone's gaze. This wasn't the confident woman I'd fallen in love with. This was someone who had secrets to protect. I stepped out of the shadows. Sarah, I called, keeping my voice steady. She froze mid-step, her head whipping around to face me. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. Then her face hardened. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice low but trembling. I approached slowly, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets to keep her from seeing them shake. "I think the better question is, what are you doing here?" Her eyes narrowed, and she took a quick step back. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Room 506, I said, letting the words hang between us like a blade. "Does that jog your memory?" The color drained from her face, and she stumbled over her words. It's not what you think." "No?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Because what I think is that you've been lying to me for months. I think you've been sneaking around, making excuses, and pretending everything is fine when it's not." She looked away, her lips pressed tightly together. "And now," I continued, stepping closer, "you're going to tell me the truth?" Her gaze snapped back to mine, defiance flickering in her eyes. "You're overreacting," she said sharply. "It's nothing. Just a work thing." I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "A work thing? You're meeting clients in hotel rooms at night now? That's a new one." "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," she hissed, her tone desperate. "I can explain." "Then explain." I snapped, cutting her off. "Explain what I saw last night. Explain the note. Explain why you're here, lying to me, instead of home where you belong." For a long moment, she said nothing, her jaw working as if she was trying to find the right words. Finally, she whispered, "Can we not do this here?" I shook my head, my voice cold. "No, Sarah. We're doing this now." She hesitated, then nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she said softly, "but you're not going to like what you hear." We moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, far from the concierge desk and the occasional passerby. Sarah sat down on a plush armchair, her hands clutching her coat as if it were a shield. I stayed standing, looming over her, needing the edge of control that came with looking down at her. "Well?" I said, crossing my arms. "Start talking." Her eyes flickered up to mine, and for the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't seen before: fear. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then took a deep breath. "It's not what you think," she began weakly. "Don't insult me, Sarah," I snapped. "I followed you. I saw you go into room 506. I heard you laughing with someone else. So drop the lies and tell me the truth." She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I thought she might actually come clean. Instead, she let out a shaky breath and said, "It started out as nothing. Just harmless fun. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I blinked, my mind racing. "How far, Sarah?" My voice dropped, colder now. Exactly how far did it go? She hesitated, her gaze darting away from mine. We talked at first. It was just talking. Someone I met at work, a guest. He was charming. He made me feel seen. You know? Like I wasn't just another part of the background. Her words were like tiny, precise cuts, each one drawing blood. So you're blaming me for this? I asked, my voice rising. For not making you feel special enough? Is that it? No, she said quickly, shaking her head. It's not your fault, okay? This is on me. I didn't plan for it to happen. I got caught up in something, and it spiraled. Caught up in what, Sarah? My hands clenched into fists. Cheating? Lying? Is he paying you? Are you selling yourself to him? Her eyes widened, and she recoiled as if I'd slapped her. What? No, she said sharply. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I demanded, stepping closer. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like you've been whoring yourself out behind my back. She stood abruptly, her face flushing with anger. Don't you dare call me that, she hissed. You don't know what it's like. You don't know how it feels to be invisible in your own marriage. Invisible? I barked a bitter laugh. You're the one who disappeared, Sarah. You're the one who left me in the dark while you snuck off to meet him. So don't stand there and act like the victim. Her lip quivered, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she looked away and muttered, It's over. It's been over for weeks. I ended it. I stared at her, my chest heaving. If it's over, I said coldly, then why are you here tonight? Her silence was answer enough. Her silence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, heavier with each passing second. She wouldn't meet my eyes, her fingers fidgeting nervously with the buttons of her coat. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, my vision narrowing as anger surged inside me. Answer me, Sarah, I demanded, my voice dangerously low. If it's over, then why are you here? She finally looked up, and for the first time that night, tears shimmered in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know why I came. I thought maybe I could explain it to him. End it properly. End it properly? I repeated, incredulous. Are you serious right now? You came here to end it properly with some guy you've been sneaking around with, and you didn't think you owed me that same courtesy? Her tears spilled over, streaking down her cheeks. It's not like that, she said, shaking her head. No, I snapped, cutting her off. You don't get to explain it away like this, Sarah. You don't get to cry and pretend this is some noble, tragic mistake. You've been lying to me for months. Months? How many times have you come here? How many times have you left me at home, wondering why you were so distant while you were with him? She didn't answer, her shoulders shaking as she cried silently. I wanted to feel sorry for her, to let the sight of her tears soften my anger, but all I felt was hollowed out. This was more than just a mistake. I continued, my voice colder now. This was a choice. Every text, every lie, every moment you spent with him was a choice. You chose to betray me. You chose to destroy everything we built. Her sobs grew louder, but I refused to stop. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice rising. Was he worth it, Sarah? Did he make you feel alive, or special, or whatever excuse you're clinging to? Because I hope it was worth losing me. She covered her face with her hands, muffling her cries. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. Didn't mean to hurt me? Sarah, you knew exactly what you were doing. Every time you walked into this hotel, every time you kissed him, touched him, you knew what it meant. You just didn't care. She looked up at me then, her tear-streaked face a mask of guilt and desperation. I care now, she said, her voice trembling. I'm begging you, please. Give me a chance to make this right. I'll do anything. Anything to fix this? I stared at her, my heart twisting painfully. Fix this? I repeated. You can't fix this, Sarah. You can't undo what you've done. Her sobs broke me then, but not in the way she hoped. I turned and walked away, her cries echoing behind me. I didn't look back. I left the lobby and stepped into the cold night air, Sarah's sobs still ringing in my ears. My chest felt like it was on fire, every breath a battle against the suffocating weight of betrayal. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The house we shared felt tainted now, a place built on the illusion of trust. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, my thoughts swirling in a storm of anger, heartbreak, and something darker, something vengeful. By the time I pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of a 24-hour diner, I'd made up my mind. This wasn't going to end with me walking away, broken and humiliated. Sarah had made her choices, and now it was my turn. I wasn't going to let her escape this unscathed. I sat in the booth for hours, nursing a cup of bitter coffee as I planned. The idea formed slowly at first, piecing itself together like a sinister puzzle. I thought of the note, the hotel room, the man she was meeting. He wasn't just some faceless stranger. He was part of this betrayal, just as guilty as Sarah. He deserved to feel the weight of what he'd done. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about turning the tables, making them feel the same anguish and humiliation I'd endured. I wouldn't confront them head-on. That would be too easy. No, I would take my time, make them squirm, force them to see the consequences of their actions. I started by gathering what I needed. First, I booked another night in the hotel, ensuring I'd be close enough to monitor their movements. Next, I purchased a small audio recorder, discreet enough to plant in their room. I wanted every word they exchanged, every damning detail, captured for later. It wasn't enough to know the truth. I needed undeniable proof. The next step required more finesse. I needed to learn more about the man Sarah was seeing. I didn't have much to go on, but I remembered the name scrawled on the back of the note, Michael. With a little digging and a few phone calls, I discovered he was a frequent guest at the hotel, often staying under a corporate account. He worked in finance, which explained the polished charm Sarah had fallen for. I didn't stop there. I found his social media profiles, his professional bio, and even photos of his family, a wife and 2 kids. My stomach churned at the realization that he wasn't just ruining my life. He was betraying his own family too. By the time I returned to the hotel, I was ready. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and headed upstairs, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and adrenaline. This was it. Tonight, I would confront them, not with words, but with actions. They wouldn't see it coming. The sun was just beginning to set when I arrived back at the hotel. The lobby was quiet, a few guests milling about, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I rode the elevator to my floor, each ding pushing me closer to the confrontation I had been preparing for. By the time I reached room 508, my hands were steady, my resolve sharpened. I set the audio recorder on the small table in my room and checked its functionality one last time. It was a slim, inconspicuous device, perfect for what I had in mind. Taking a deep breath, I slipped it into my jacket pocket and headed for room 506. The hallway was eerily silent as I approached their door. My heart thundered in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knocked softly, knowing they would be caught off guard. My disguise, a cap pulled low and a scarf wrapped loosely around my neck, was simple but enough to make me unrecognizable at first glance. It was Sarah who opened the door. Her expression immediately twisted into shock and confusion when she saw me standing there. "Room service," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "Room service," she repeated, her voice faltering. She glanced behind her, as if checking for someone. I held up a small paper bag I'd brought with me, its contents irrelevant. "Compliments of the house," I added, stepping forward as if expecting her to let me in. She hesitated but moved aside, her instincts betraying her caution. The room was dimly lit, with curtains drawn tightly shut. Michael sat in an armchair near the window, his jacket draped carelessly over the back of the chair. He looked up, startled by my sudden entrance. "Who's this?" he asked, his tone sharp. Sarah stammered. I don't know." He said, "Room service?" "Compliments of the house," I repeated, my tone carrying a subtle edge. I set the bag on the table and subtly placed the audio recorder beneath a decorative napkin as I did. "Enjoy your evening." Michael frowned, his suspicion evident. "Wait a second. but I was already moving toward the door. "Just doing my job," I said, my voice calm, my movements deliberate. I stepped out before they could protest further, the door clicking shut behind me. I exhaled deeply, my pulse racing as I walked back to my room. They wouldn't think much of it now, but they'd regret not questioning me more later. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall as I waited. Time stretched on, every minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, the recorder's remote sync app on my phone began to light up, confirming it was capturing every word being spoken in room 506. I watched the waveform display dance with their voices, my stomach churning as I imagined what they were saying. Tomorrow, I would have all the proof I needed. Proof of her betrayal. Proof of his complicity. Proof of everything. And that proof would be their undoing. I stayed up that night, listening to snippets of their conversation through the audio recorder's feed. Every laugh, every flirtatious word, every detail of their plans drove the knife deeper into my chest. But I didn't flinch. I forced myself to endure it, every damning word fueling the fire of my resolve. Michael spoke casually about his family, his wife, his kids, like they were nothing more than a footnote in his life. Sarah laughed along, her voice light and carefree, as though she wasn't tearing apart the life we'd built. "You think he suspects anything?" Michael asked at one point, his tone amused. Sarah hesitated before answering. "No," she said quietly. "He's clueless. He wouldn't dare question me." Clueless. The word echoed in my mind like a taunt. She thought I was oblivious, blind to her deceit. But by morning, they would see just how wrong she was. The next day, I checked out of the hotel early, leaving the recorder in place. I had what I needed, but I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about catching them in the act. It was about making them face the full weight of their choices. I spent the morning compiling everything I'd gathered, the recording, screenshots of Michael's social media profiles, and the damning messages I'd recovered from Sarah's phone the night before. I packaged it all neatly into an envelope and mailed a copy to Michael's wife, addressed with a note that read, "You deserve the truth." For Sarah, I had something more personal planned. That evening, I waited for Sarah to come home, my heart pounding as I rehearsed what I would say. She arrived just past 9 p.m., looking exhausted but not remorseful. "Long day?" I asked, feigning casualness. She froze, her eyes narrowing. "What's with the attitude?" I held up a single photograph I'd printed from the footage, a blurry but unmistakable shot of her and Michael in the hotel room. Her face went pale. "Care to explain this?" I said, my voice cold. She stumbled over her words, trying to deny, deflect, but I didn't let her. I laid out the evidence, piece by piece, watching as her excuses crumbled. She finally broke down, falling to her knees. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Please let me fix this." "Fix it?" I asked, my voice laced with anger. "You can't fix this. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything we had." I spent the night alone, locked in the guest room, while Sarah cried herself to sleep in hours. I couldn't sleep, my mind torn between the love I once felt for her and the anger that now consumed me. By morning, my decision was clear. When Sarah woke up, she found a suitcase by the door, packed with her belongings. "You're leaving," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me in shock. "Please, I'll do anything." "It's too late," I interrupted. "I've already filed for divorce. And if you think I'm going to let you walk away unscathed, you're wrong. Michael's wife knows everything. Your secret is out." Her face crumpled as the reality hit her. She tried to plead, but I was done listening. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was explosive. Michael's wife left him, taking their kids. Sarah moved in with a friend, her life in shambles. I finalized the divorce, cutting all ties with her. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in months, I felt free. I had been broken, betrayed, but I had survived. In the end, Sarah's betrayal didn't define me. It became a catalyst for something better, a life without lies, without deceit. I was finally ready to move on,